The massive TSF Relentless slowed as it approached Nexus Station, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight. Admiral John Peterson stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, watching as the enormous diplomatic hub grew larger in the view screen. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but his mind raced with concerns about the upcoming council meeting. "Admiral, we're receiving docking instructions," Lieutenant Commander Hayes reported from her station. "They're directing us to Bay 17, the diplomatic quarter." Peterson nodded. "Acknowledged. Take us in, Lieutenant Commander, and inform the legal diplomatic team to prepare for departure. I want them ready in 30 minutes. "Yes, sir." As Hayes relayed his orders, Peterson moved to the observation deck. The diplomatic quarter of Nexus Station was reserved for official representatives of council races. That the Terran Empire's flagship was granted access there, rather than the standard military docking bays, could be interpreted as a positive sign, or a calculated political move. Ambassador Chen Wei approached, datapad in hand. "Admiral, I've received the preliminary agenda for the council meeting. They've allocated us the standard presentation time, but the subsequent discussion period has been extended significantly." "Extended?" Peterson frowned. "That's unusual for a routine progress report." "Indeed. My team is analyzing potential topics they might raise. Given recent developments in our military and colonization efforts, I suspect they may have concerns." Peterson's frown deepened. The Terran Empire had been expanding rapidly since joining the Galactic community 50 years ago. What had begun as a handful of colony worlds had grown into a significant interstellar presence, with dozens of thriving settlements and a formidable defense force. The TSF, Terran Space Force, had evolved from converted commercial vessels to purpose-built warships like the Relentless. "Keep me informed of your analysis, Ambassador. I want no surprises when we enter that chamber." "Of course, Admiral." As Chen departed, Peterson turned his attention back to the approaching station. Nexus was a marvel of engineering, a massive artificial construct nearly the size of Earth's moon, serving as the political and diplomatic center of the Galactic Council. Constructed by the combined efforts of the founding races centuries ago, it represented the pinnacle of cooperation among the diverse species that made up the Council. A cooperation that had been strained by humanity's meteoric rise. "Admiral," Hayes called from behind him. "Secure transmission from Earth. President Morgan requests to speak with you." "I'll take it in my quarters." In his private chamber, Peterson activated the secure communication terminal. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of President Olivia Morgan, leader of the Terran Empire. "Admiral Peterson," she greeted, her voice clear despite the vast distance the transmission had traveled. "How goes your approach to Nexus?" "Smooth so far. Madam President, we're docking within the hour. Ambassador Chen's team is preparing for the council meeting." Morgan nodded, her sharp eyes studying him through the holographic interface. "Good. I've just come from a briefing on Project Aegis. Dr. Susan Bell reports that the initial deployment has been successful. The system is performing beyond expectations." Peterson couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Aegis represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity, a planetary defense system designed to protect Terran colonies without the need for a permanent military presence. "That's excellent news, Madam President. The timing couldn't be better." "Indeed. With the Council growing increasingly concerned about our military expansion, Aegis offers us an alternative narrative. Defense rather than offense. Protection rather than aggression. Do you believe they'll accept that distinction?" Morgan's expression grew thoughtful. "Some will, others." She shook her head slightly. "The older races have grown accustomed to their position in the hierarchy. Our rapid advancement threatens that order. The law of technological equivalence is on our side," Peterson pointed out. All member species have the right to develop technologies equivalent to those possessed by other members. Laws can be interpreted, Admiral, and the Council has centuries of experience in shaping those interpretations to maintain the status quo. Morgan leaned forward slightly. Be vigilant in that chamber. Listen more than you speak. And remember that while we respect the Council, we will not sacrifice our sovereignty or security. Understood, Madam President. Good luck, Admiral. Earth stands with you. The transmission ended, leaving Peterson alone with his thoughts. He had served the Terran Empire for over 30 years, witnessing its transformation from a fledgling spacefaring civilization to a respected and increasingly feared power in the galaxy. But as he prepared to face the Galactic Council, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity stood at a crossroads, one whose direction would be determined in the chambers of Nexus Station. The Council Chamber was a testament to the grandeur of the galactic community. The circular room rose several stories high, with tiered seating arranged to accommodate representatives of the 27 member species. Ornate decorations from various cultures adorned the walls, while the ceiling displayed a real-time holographic map of the galaxy, with member worlds highlighted in their respective colors. Admiral Peterson and Ambassador Chen led the Terran delegation to their designated position. As the newest members of the Council, humans were seated at the lowest tier, directly across from the High Council, the 5 elder races who served as the executive authority. Impressive as always, Chen murmured, taking his seat beside Peterson. A deliberate reminder of our place in the hierarchy. Peterson nodded slightly, but kept his expression neutral. Politics was Chen's arena. The Admiral was here primarily as a military representative, though he understood the games being played. The chamber quieted as Zex Talon, the Arcturian representative and current head of the High Council, rose from his seat. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales and piercing yellow eyes, Talon cut an imposing figure. This gathering of the Galactic Council is now in session, he announced, his translator converting his sibilant native language into standard galactic common. We welcome all representatives and acknowledge their equal voice in these proceedings. A formal declaration that Peterson knew many of the elder races considered mere ceremony rather than principle. Our first matter concerns the progress report of the Terran Empire, Talon continued. Admiral John Peterson and the Terran delegation have prepared a presentation on their recent developments. Admiral, you may proceed. Peterson rose, activating the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council, I bring greetings from President Olivia Morgan and the people of Earth. In accordance with Council protocols, I present our annual progress report. For the next 20 minutes, Peterson outlined the developments within the Terran Empire: economic growth, scientific advancements, colonization efforts, and cultural exchanges. He emphasized cooperation with other species and carefully framed military developments as defensive measures to protect expanding colonial interests. As he concluded, Peterson noticed the subtle exchanges of glances among the High Council members. Something was brewing. Thank you, Admiral Peterson, Talon said, his tone neutral. Your report is comprehensive, as always. The Council now opens the floor for questions and discussion. Volian. The Volian representative, known for his hawkish stance toward emerging powers, was the first to speak. Admiral Peterson, your report mentions 17 new colonial outposts established in the past standard year. This represents a 32% increase in Terran territorial expansion. Would you care to explain this accelerated colonization program? Peterson had anticipated this line of questioning. The increase reflects our growing population and resource needs. Representative Volian, all settlements have been established in accordance with Council regulations, in unclaimed systems, with proper environmental impact assessments and cultural preservation protocols where applicable. That may be technically correct, Volian countered. But such rapid expansion has historical precedents that concern many council members. Previous emerging powers that expanded at similar rates eventually faced resource conflicts with established species. The Terran Empire has no territorial ambitions beyond providing for our citizens, Peterson assured him. We have maintained open diplomatic channels with all neighboring species and have signed non-aggression pacts with 12 member worlds in regions where our interests overlap. Volian's facial tentacles writhed slightly. An expression Peterson had learned indicated skepticism. Non-aggression pacts backed by an increasingly militarized presence. Your report glosses over the expansion of your Space Force. Admiral, our intelligence indicates a 47% increase in military vessel production over the previous year. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Peterson maintained his composure, though inwardly he cursed. The military production figures were not classified, but they had not been highlighted in the presentation for obvious reasons. The Terran Space Force grows in proportion to our territorial responsibilities, he replied evenly. With expanded colonial holdings comes an increased need for security against piracy, natural disasters, and other emergencies. We maintain transparency in our military capabilities as required by Council protocols. Transparency, yes, interjected Mira Seren, the Alteran representative. Her crystalline form shimmered as she spoke. But the pattern is concerning, Admiral, especially when combined with your research into advanced weapons technologies. The Council has received reports of a project designated Aegis, a planetary-scale defense system being deployed to your outer colonies. Peterson felt a chill. Aegis wasn't classified, but its details were not widely shared. That the Council had specific intelligence about the project suggested either a security breach or more extensive monitoring of Terran activities than previously believed. Project Aegis is a defensive system designed to protect civilian populations, he stated firmly. Its development is in accordance with the law of technological equivalence. Similar systems are employed by at least 7 Council races. Not with the same capabilities, Zex Talon said, entering the discussion. Our preliminary analysis suggests Aegis incorporates technologies that exceed the defensive needs of colonial protection. Some aspects appear to have offensive applications. The chamber grew tense as Peterson formulated his response. Before he could speak, however, Talon raised a clawed hand. Admiral Peterson, Ambassador Chen, honored representatives. This discussion highlights concerns that have been growing within the Council for some time. The rapid expansion of the Terran Empire, both territorially and militarily, represents a potential destabilizing factor in our galactic community. Talon's gaze swept the chamber. After extensive deliberation, the High Council has prepared a formal resolution regarding the Terran situation. I will now present this resolution for consideration by the full Council. Peterson exchanged an alarmed glance with Chen. This was unexpected. Formal resolutions were typically announced in advance to allow affected parties to prepare responses. A holographic document appeared before each representative as Talon began to read. Resolution 7291, regarding the expansion and development of the Terran Empire. Whereas the rapid growth of Terran military capabilities poses a potential threat to galactic stability. Whereas the acceleration of Terran colonization efforts risks resource conflicts with established species. Whereas certain technological developments within the Terran Empire exceed the reasonable needs for colonial defense. The High Council proposes the following measures. 1. The Terran Empire will reduce military production to 2173 levels, with verification protocols to be established by Council observers. 2. All advanced weapons research, including Project Aegis, will be subject to Council oversight, with technical specifications shared among all member species. 3. The Terran colonial expansion program will be limited to no more than 5 new settlements per standard year for the next decade. 4. The Terran Empire will agree to Council mediators in all territorial negotiations with other species. The High Council presents this resolution as a reasonable compromise to address growing concerns while respecting Terran sovereignty. We request the Terran representatives to convey these terms to their government and provide a formal response within 30 standard days. As Talon concluded, stunned silence filled the chamber. What had been presented wasn't a resolution. It was an ultimatum. Peterson rose slowly to his feet, struggling to contain his anger. Representative Talon, the Terran Empire rejects the premise of this resolution. These proposed measures constitute a direct infringement on our sovereign rights as a council member. No other species is subject to such restrictions. No other species has expanded at such an alarming rate, Volian countered. The resolution merely seeks to ensure that Terran growth proceeds at a pace that maintains galactic stability. By crippling our ability to defend our citizens and develop our territories, Peterson retorted, this is discriminatory treatment that violates the founding principles of the Council. Murmurs of both agreement and disagreement rippled through the chamber. Peterson noted that while the elder races seemed unified in their support of the resolution, many of the middle-tier species appeared uncomfortable with the precedent being set. The resolution has been presented, Talon stated firmly. It will be put to a vote in 30 days, following Terran response. This session of the Council is adjourned. As the representatives began to disperse, Chen gripped Peterson's arm. This is worse than we anticipated, Admiral. They're not just expressing concerns. They're attempting to formalize restrictions on our development. Peterson nodded grimly. Prepare a secure transmission to Earth. President Morgan needs to hear about this immediately. The Terran Empire is facing its greatest diplomatic crisis since joining the galactic community. The Oval Office in New Washington hummed with tension as President Olivia Morgan finished reading the report from Nexus Station. Her cabinet members and military advisors waited in silence, watching as their leader processed the implications of the Council's ultimatum. Morgan set down the datapad and looked up, her expression resolute. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems the elder races have shown their hand. They fear our progress and seek to contain it through diplomatic coercion. Secretary of State Garcia leaned forward. Madam President, this resolution represents a fundamental shift in our relationship with the Council. If passed, it would establish a dangerous precedent of unequal treatment among member species, and effectively halt our expansion for a decade, added Defense Secretary Williams. Our population projections indicate we'll need at least 20 new colonies in that time frame just to accommodate natural growth. Morgan nodded. The timing is also suspect. With Project Aegis nearing full deployment, we're approaching a level of defensive capability that would make military coercion against our colonies impractical. The Council, or at least its more hawkish elements, likely sees this as their last opportunity to assert control over our development. What are our options, Madam President? Asked Sam Bennett, the National Security Advisor. Morgan rose from her chair and moved to the large holographic display dominating one wall of the office. With a gesture, she brought up a galactic map highlighting Terran holdings and nearby powers. Diplomatic, economic, and military, she replied. On the diplomatic front, we need to build a coalition within the Council to oppose this resolution. Focus on the mid-tier species. They may recognize that such a precedent could be used against them in the future. Garcia nodded. Several have already expressed private concerns. The Rigelians and Centauri in particular have faced similar, if less severe, pressure from the elder races. Economically, we need to leverage our trade relationships, Morgan continued. Many Council worlds have become dependent on Terran agricultural exports and technology. Subtle reminders of these interdependencies might help sway opinions. And militarily, Williams prompted. Morgan's expression hardened. We accelerate the deployment of Aegis to all frontier colonies, particularly those near Volian space. Their representative was the most aggressive during the Council session, and intelligence suggests they've been building up forces near our borders for months. Provocative, Bennett observed. The Council could view such deployments as confirmation of their concerns. Which is why we'll be transparent about it, Morgan countered. We announce the deployments publicly, emphasizing their defensive nature and inviting neutral observers to verify that Aegis poses no offensive threat to neighboring systems. A demonstration of both strength and restraint. Williams nodded approvingly. Precisely. Morgan returned to her seat. I want a comprehensive response strategy on my desk within 48 hours. Garcia, prepare a diplomatic team. I'll be personally leading negotiations at Nexus. The cabinet members exchanged surprised glances. Madam President, Garcia said carefully, while your personal involvement would certainly underscore the seriousness with which we view this situation, it's unusual for a head of state to engage directly in council proceedings. Unusual times call for unusual measures. Secretary, Morgan's tone brooked no argument. The elder races have escalated this from a routine diplomatic matter to a direct challenge to our sovereignty. My presence will signal that Earth stands united and resolute in the face of this ultimatum. She looked around the table, meeting each advisor's gaze. Make no mistake, this is a pivotal moment for humanity's place in the galaxy. How we respond will determine whether we continue as equal partners in the galactic community or accept a subordinate role for generations to come. The cabinet meeting continued for hours, dissecting every aspect of the Council's resolution and formulating Earth's response. As discussions wound down, Morgan asked Williams and Dr. Susan Bell, the lead scientist on Project Aegis, to remain behind. When the others had departed, Morgan activated additional security measures, ensuring their conversation would remain private. Dr. Bell, what's the status of the Aegis deployment to our frontier colonies? Bell, a brilliant physicist whose innovations had made Aegis possible, consulted her datapad. New Hope is scheduled to receive the system next month. Madam President, the other frontier worlds would follow over the subsequent 6 months. Accelerate it, Morgan ordered. I want New Hope's system operational within 2 weeks. Bell's eyes widened. That's challenging, Madam President. The infrastructure is in place, but calibration typically requires at least 3 weeks of testing. You have 2. New Hope is our most vulnerable colony, positioned nearest to Volian space. If they decide to make a military statement while we're entangled in diplomacy, that's where they'll strike. Williams nodded in agreement. Intelligence reports increased Volian fleet activity in that sector. Nothing overtly aggressive yet, but the pattern is concerning. What about the other frontier worlds? Morgan asked. We can compress the timeline somewhat, Bell replied. Perhaps deploy basic functionality within a month, with full calibration to follow. Do it. And Williams. I want fleet exercises in the Arcturus sector. Nothing provocative, but visible enough to remind the Volians that our diplomatic patience doesn't equal military weakness. Yes, Madam President. Morgan's expression softened slightly. Susan, I know I'm asking a lot of your team, but Aegis may prove to be more than just a defense system. It could be the key to changing the entire dynamic of this confrontation. Bell nodded, understanding the implications. We won't let you down, Madam President. I know you won't. Morgan gestured toward the door. That will be all for now. Keep me updated on your progress. As her advisors departed, Morgan turned to the window overlooking New Washington's skyline. The gleaming towers and busy air lanes of Earth's new capital represented humanity's resilience, rebuilt after the devastation of the First Contact War 60 years ago, when misunderstandings had led to brief but destructive hostilities before diplomatic relations were established. The Terran Empire had grown from those ashes, determined never again to be technologically outmatched. And now, that very determination had brought them into conflict with the established order of the galaxy. Morgan's reflection stared back at her, resolute. Humanity would not bow to intimidation, no matter how diplomatically it was phrased. The coming weeks would test her leadership and humanity's place among the stars. She was ready for the challenge. Colonel Ryan Brooks surveyed the vast plain where the main components of the Aegis system were being assembled. New Hope's twin suns beat down on the construction site, where hundreds of engineers and technicians worked around the clock to meet the accelerated deployment schedule. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Lieutenant Amy Barnes remarked as she joined him at the observation post. "Impressive," Brooks agreed. "Hard to believe we've compressed a month's work into 10 days. Dr. Bell's team has been remarkable. The core systems are already online. We're just finalizing the calibration of the response matrices." Brooks nodded, studying the massive energy projectors being positioned at strategic points across the colony's perimeter. Aegis was a revolutionary defensive system that utilized energy reflection principles rather than traditional shields or weaponry. When activated, it could capture incoming energy, whether from weapons fire, natural phenomena, or other sources, and redistribute it along predetermined pathways. In theory, an attacking fleet could find its own weapons energy, reflected back in carefully calculated patterns, disabling their systems without causing catastrophic destruction. A defense that responded proportionally to aggression, without escalation. "Any word from Earth?" Barnes asked, breaking into his thoughts. "President Morgan departed for Nexus Station yesterday. The diplomatic team is working to build coalition support against the Council's resolution, but the elder races are applying significant pressure on their traditional allies." Barnes frowned. "Do you think it will come to military action?" Brooks considered the question carefully. As military commander of New Hope, his responsibility was to prepare for worst-case scenarios while hoping for diplomatic solutions. "I think we're seeing a fundamental realignment of galactic politics," he said finally. "The elder races have grown accustomed to a certain hierarchy, with themselves at the apex. Humanity's rapid advancement threatens that arrangement." "So Aegis is more than just a defense system," Barnes observed. "It's a statement." "Exactly. It demonstrates that we can develop innovative solutions that achieve security without aggression." Brooks gestured toward the energy projectors. "Traditional thinking would have us building bigger weapons, more destructive capabilities. Instead, we've created a system that turns an attacker's force against itself, without escalation. Philosophical as well as practical." "Indeed. And perhaps that's what truly concerns the Council. Not just our growing strength, but the different way we're approaching it." A technician approached, saluting crisply. "Colonel Brooks, we've detected unusual activity at the edge of the system. Long-range sensors show multiple ships dropping out of FTL transit." Brooks's expression turned grave. "Identification?" "Signatures match Volian military vessels, sir. A substantial force. At least 15 capital ships and numerous support craft." "Alert status Alpha," Brooks ordered immediately. "Inform all civilian centers to initiate shelter protocols. Lieutenant Barnes, how soon can Aegis be brought online?" Barnes consulted her datapad, exchanging rapid communications with the technical team. "Core systems are operational. We haven't completed fine calibration, but basic functionality is available." "That will have to do. Activate the system and prepare for potential engagement." As Barnes relayed the orders, Brooks established a secure communication link to Earth. This was no coincidence. The Volians had chosen to make their move precisely when Earth's leadership was focused on diplomatic efforts at Nexus. Whether authorized by the Council or acting independently, the Volian fleet presented a direct threat to New Hope, and Brooks was determined that the colony would not stand defenseless. On Nexus Station, President Morgan had just concluded a private meeting with representatives of the Centauri Alliance when Admiral Peterson received the urgent communication from New Hope. "Madam President," he interrupted, his expression grim, "we have a situation. Volian military forces have entered the New Hope system. Colonel Brooks reports at least 15 capital ships and supporting craft." The diplomatic team fell silent, the implications immediately clear. Have they made hostile moves? Morgan asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the news. Not yet. They're maintaining position at the system's edge. Brooks has activated Aegis and implemented civilian protection protocols. Morgan's eyes narrowed. This is no coincidence. The Volians are testing our resolve, and perhaps hoping to provoke a response that would justify the Council's concerns about our military posture. Or create a fait accompli before the resolution vote, suggested Ambassador Chen. If they can demonstrate that our colonies are vulnerable, it strengthens their argument for restrictions. Either way, we must respond carefully. Morgan turned to her communications officer. Establish a direct channel to the Volian fleet. I want to address their commander personally. Madam President, Peterson cautioned. Protocol would suggest working through council mediators for any potential conflict situation. Protocol also suggests that member species don't position battle fleets near each other's colonies without prior notification. Morgan replied sharply. The Volians have abandoned protocol. We'll address them directly. Within minutes, a holographic display activated, showing a Volian commander in full military regalia. His facial tentacles were arranged in a pattern that Peterson recognized as indicating aggressive confidence. This is President Olivia Morgan of the Terran Empire. Morgan began without preamble. Your fleet has entered sovereign Terran space without authorization or prior notification. Explain your presence near our colony of New Hope. President Morgan, the Volian responded, his translator conveying a tone of feigned surprise. I am Fleet Commander Dex Var of the Volian Protectorate. Our presence is merely a training exercise in neutral space, adjacent to your territory. 15 capital ships do not constitute a training exercise. Commander Var, and your position is well within the recognized boundary of the New Hope system, not in neutral space. Var's tentacles shifted slightly. Perhaps there is a misunderstanding regarding navigational boundaries. I assure you, we have no hostile intent toward your colony. Then you will have no objection to withdrawing your forces immediately, Morgan stated, making it clear this was not a request. Our exercise protocols require completion of certain maneuvers, Var countered. We will, of course, maintain a respectful distance from your settlement and withdraw when our training objectives are met. Morgan's expression hardened. Commander Var, let me be absolutely clear. New Hope is under the protection of the Terran Empire. Any approach toward the colony will be considered a hostile act and met with appropriate defensive measures. Defense is, of course, you're right, Var replied, his translated voice taking on a subtle edge. As is our right to navigate space in accordance with Council protocols. Perhaps this situation highlights the very concerns being discussed at Nexus. The potential for conflict when emerging powers expand too rapidly into regions of shared interest. The implied threat was unmistakable. Before Morgan could respond, Peterson received another urgent communication from New Hope. Madam President, he said quietly, 3 Volian vessels have broken formation and are accelerating toward the colony. Morgan never took her eyes from Var's holographic image. Your ships are advancing on New Hope. Commander, I order them to halt immediately. A navigational adjustment only. President Morgan, to better observe the impressive development of your colony. Var's tentacles now displayed a pattern Peterson recognized as smug satisfaction. We've received intelligence about a new defensive system being deployed there. Aegis. I believe it's called. Such technology is of great interest to the Council. Your navigational adjustment will cease now. Commander, this is your final warning. Or what? President Morgan? Will you fire on a Council member's vessels during a peaceful exercise? That would certainly validate concerns about Terran aggression. Morgan terminated the connection and turned to Peterson. They're deliberately provoking us, hoping we'll respond with conventional military force and justify the Council's resolution. Brooks is requesting firing authorization, Peterson reported. The Volian vessels will be in weapons range of the colony within minutes. No conventional response, Morgan decided. Instruct Brooks to activate Aegis at full capacity when the Volian ships cross the colony's defensive perimeter. Let's see if our new system performs as designed. Peterson relayed the orders, then established a secure viewing link to New Hope's command center. Morgan, Peterson, and the diplomatic team watched tensely as the Volian ships continued their approach, ignoring repeated warnings from the colony. "Aegis activated," came Brooks's voice over the comm. "Energy matrices at full capacity. Volian vessels have crossed the defensive perimeter and are continuing to advance." The holographic display showed 3 Volian warships closing on New Hope's main settlement. Suddenly, one of them fired, an energy pulse that streaked toward the colony's outskirts. "Energy signature detected," reported Barnes from the command center. "Aegis responding." The pulse never reached its target. Instead, it seemed to distort and then divert, flowing into one of the energy projectors positioned around the colony. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a precisely calibrated pulse emanated from multiple projectors simultaneously, washing over the Volian vessels in a rippling wave of their own redirected energy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Volian ships didn't explode or disintegrate. Instead, their systems appeared to fail, lights flickering and engines shutting down. All 3 vessels began to drift, clearly disabled but structurally intact. "Aegis functioning within parameters," Brooks reported, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. Volian weapons energy has been redistributed to target their propulsion and weapon systems while avoiding life support and structural components. Ships are effectively neutralized without casualties. On Nexus Station, the Terran diplomatic team watched in stunned silence. Aegis had performed even better than expected, demonstrating precisely the philosophy behind its design: proportional defense without escalation. "Open a channel to Commander Var," Morgan ordered, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. When the Volian commander's image appeared, his tentacles were arranged in a pattern that Peterson now recognized as indicating alarm. "Commander Var," Morgan began, "as you can see, your vessels that approach New Hope have been temporarily disabled. Their crews are unharmed, and essential systems remain functional. This demonstration of our Aegis defense system was calibrated specifically to prevent casualties while neutralizing the threat to our colony." Var's translator conveyed his stunned response. "What have you done to my ships?" "We've reflected their own energy back in a controlled pattern," Morgan explained. "The effect is temporary. Systems will reset within approximately 6 hours, allowing your vessels to withdraw. We will, of course, provide emergency support if needed for the safety of your crews." "This technology," Var began, then seemed to reconsider his words. "The Council will hear of this provocation." "The Council will indeed hear of this incident," Morgan agreed, "including the unprovoked approach of Volian warships toward a civilian colony and the firing of weapons within our sovereign territory. They will also hear of the Terran response, a defensive action that neutralized the threat without a single casualty." She leaned forward slightly. "Commander Var, your remaining vessels will withdraw from the New Hope system immediately. The Terran Empire has demonstrated both our capability and our restraint. Test neither again." Without waiting for a response, Morgan terminated the connection and turned to her team. "Prepare a full report for the Council. Include all sensor data from New Hope, showing the Volian approach, their weapons fire, and our proportional response. I want this distributed to all Council representatives before our next session." "The Volians will attempt to spin this as Terran aggression," Chen cautioned. "Which is why the technical data is crucial," Morgan replied. "Aegis just demonstrated exactly what we've claimed: a defensive system that responds proportionally to threats without escalation. No casualties, no destruction, just the neutralization of hostile action." Peterson's expression was thoughtful. "This changes the diplomatic equation considerably," Madam President, the middle-tier species will be interested in this technology, particularly those who feel vulnerable to pressure from the elder races. Precisely. Morgan's smile was slight, but determined. Our response to the Council's ultimatum just became considerably stronger. Prepare for the next session. I believe we have a counter-proposal to present. The Council chamber hummed with tension as representatives gathered for the emergency session called to address the New Hope incident. News had spread rapidly through Nexus Station, with varying accounts of what had transpired between Terran and Volian forces. President Morgan led the Terran delegation personally, a break from tradition that emphasized the gravity with which Earth viewed the situation. She sat beside Admiral Peterson and Ambassador Chen, her posture straight and her expression resolute. Across the chamber, the Volian delegation was notably subdued. Commander Var was present, seated behind Representative Volian, his tentacles arranged in a pattern that suggested defensive caution. Zex Talon called the session to order, his scaled features arranged in what Peterson had learned to recognize as diplomatic neutrality. This emergency session will address the recent incident in the Terran colony system, designated New Hope. As serious allegations have been made by both parties, each will present their account of events, followed by evidence and witness testimony. He gestured toward the Volian delegation. As the aggrieved party, Representative Volian may begin. Volian rose, his tentacles writhing in what Peterson now knew indicated righteous indignation. Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council, I come before you to report a grave and unprovoked attack on Volian vessels conducting a peaceful training exercise. 3 of our ships, approaching the Terran colony for routine observation, were suddenly, and without warning, disabled by an unknown weapon of tremendous power. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as Volian continued. This aggressive action validates the concerns expressed in Resolution 7291. The Terrans have developed and deployed weapons technology that exceeds defensive necessity and threatens the stability of the region. We demand immediate sanctions and the implementation of the resolution without further delay. As Volian resumed his seat, Talon turned to the Terran delegation. President Morgan, you may present your account of the incident. Morgan rose with quiet dignity. Honorable representatives, the Volian account omits several critical facts. Their fleet of 15 capital ships entered sovereign Terran space without notification or permission. When instructed to withdraw, 3 vessels broke formation and accelerated toward our colony. Despite multiple warnings, they continued their approach and fired weapons at our settlement. She gestured, and a holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing sensor data from New Hope. This evidence clearly shows the unprovoked Volian aggression and the limited, proportional Terran response. The representatives watched as the recording played, showing the Volian ships entering the system, their approach toward the colony despite warnings, and finally, the weapons fire that was intercepted and redirected by the Aegis system. What you have witnessed, Morgan continued as the recording ended, is not an attack, but a defensive response. The Aegis system captured the energy from the Volian weapons and redistributed it in a carefully calculated pattern that temporarily disabled their ships without causing structural damage or casualties. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various representatives. This is the threatening technology that concerns the Council, a system designed specifically to protect civilian populations without escalation or destruction. A system that, when faced with actual aggression, responded with minimal force and maximum restraint. The chamber had grown quiet as Morgan spoke. Even the elder races seemed taken aback by the evidence presented. Furthermore, Morgan continued, I must question why Volian military forces were conducting training exercises in Terran space precisely when diplomatic tensions were highest, and why Commander Var, when directly confronted, admitted to intelligence gathering regarding our defensive capabilities. She turned her gaze directly to the Volian delegation. This was no coincidence, but a deliberate provocation, an attempt to force a conventional military response that would justify the Council's restrictions on Terran development. Talon raised a clawed hand. These are serious allegations. President Morgan, Representative Volian, do you wish to respond? Volian rose again, his tentacles now arranged in a pattern that suggested defensive posturing. The Terran interpretation of events is self-serving. Our approach was misunderstood, and any weapons discharge was accidental, a system malfunction that the Terrans exploited for political advantage. A system malfunction that occurred precisely when your ships crossed our defensive perimeter, despite repeated warnings, Morgan countered. Your vessels fired first. Representative Volian, the sensor data is unequivocal. Before Volian could respond, Mira Seren of the Alterans requested recognition. When Talon acknowledged her, the crystalline being's melodious voice filled the chamber. I have analyzed the sensor data presented by the Terran delegation. It appears authentic and unaltered. The evidence supports President Morgan's account of events. The Volian vessels did indeed fire first, and the Terran response was proportional and non-lethal. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Alterans were known for their analytical abilities and relative neutrality in power politics. Encouraged by this support, Morgan pressed her advantage. Honorable representatives, this incident highlights the fundamental flaw in Resolution 7291. The resolution presumes that Terran technological development represents a threat to galactic stability. Yet when actually tested in conflict, our technology demonstrated precisely the opposite. A commitment to defense without destruction, to security without escalation. She moved to the center of the chamber, commanding attention. The Terran Empire did not seek this confrontation, but neither will we apologize for defending our citizens. What we will do is offer an alternative to the Council's ultimatum, a new framework for cooperation that addresses legitimate concerns while respecting the sovereign rights of all species. Morgan activated a holographic display, revealing a document titled Proposal for Galactic Federation Framework. Instead of restrictions that target a single species, I propose a new structure for our galactic community, a federation based on equality rather than hierarchy, on cooperation rather than control. Under this framework, all member species would have equal representation in legislative matters, with decisions requiring true consensus rather than the current system of weighted influence. The chamber erupted in a mixture of surprise, interest, and concern. The elder races in particular seemed disturbed by the proposal, while many middle-tier species showed obvious interest. Morgan continued above the commotion. This federation would establish transparent protocols for technological development, ensuring that innovations are shared for common benefit while respecting intellectual property rights. Military forces would operate under collective security arrangements, with joint oversight of deployments near disputed regions. Most importantly, she emphasized, as the chamber quieted, the Federation would recognize the fundamental principle that all sentient species have an equal right to development and security. No arbitrary restrictions based on age of spacefaring capability or historical precedent. Talon's expression was unreadable as he studied the proposal. President Morgan, you present an ambitious alternative. However, the current council structure has maintained galactic stability for centuries. What you propose would fundamentally alter established relationships and hierarchies. Established hierarchies that increasingly fail to reflect current realities. Morgan countered, the galaxy is changing. Representative Talon, new species are emerging, technologies are evolving, and power dynamics are shifting. We can either adapt our institutions to accommodate these changes peacefully, or we can cling to outdated structures until they inevitably fracture under pressure. An interesting philosophical argument, Talon replied, but hardly a practical basis for interstellar governance. I disagree, came a new voice. The Rigelian representative, Saren Vox, rose from his seat. The Rigelian Confederacy finds merit in President Morgan's proposal. For too long, newer members of the galactic community have been expected to accept permanent junior status. A more equitable structure deserves serious consideration. Several other representatives indicated agreement, particularly from species that had joined the Council within the last few centuries. Sensing the shift in momentum, Morgan pressed forward. I propose that the Council establish a transition committee to examine this framework in detail. In the meantime, Resolution 7291 should be tabled pending the committee's findings. Such a delay serves Terran interests at the expense of galactic security. Volian objected. On the contrary, Morgan responded, the New Hope incident has demonstrated that Terran technology prioritizes security through restraint, rather than overwhelming force. Had we responded to Volian aggression with conventional weapons, we would be discussing casualties and escalating hostilities rather than political frameworks. She gestured toward the data still displayed from the encounter. This is the reality of Terran development, not conquest or domination, but innovation that offers new approaches to long-standing challenges. The question before the Council is whether to embrace such innovation or attempt to suppress it. The chamber fell into intense discussion, with representatives forming into impromptu caucuses to debate the proposal. Peterson leaned close to Morgan. You've created quite a stir, Madam President. The elder races look distinctly uncomfortable. As they should, Morgan replied quietly. Their comfortable dominance is being challenged, not just by us, but by the very structure of their own creation. The Council was designed to preserve stability through hierarchy. We're offering stability through equality. After nearly an hour of debate, Talon called the session back to order. Having consulted with the High Council and considered the views expressed by various delegations, I propose the following interim resolution. First, Resolution 7291 will be held in abeyance pending further review. Second, a transition committee will be established with representatives from all Council species to examine President Morgan's Federation proposal. Third, all military forces will maintain current positions, with no further deployments to disputed regions until the committee completes its work. He surveyed the chamber. Are there objections to this interim resolution? Volian rose immediately. The Volian Protectorate objects. This delay only allows the Terrans to further develop their military capabilities, while diplomatic processes drag on indefinitely. Your objection is noted. Representative Volian, Talon acknowledged. However, the evidence presented regarding the recent incident suggests that immediate action based on unsubstantiated concerns may be premature. The interim resolution stands. This emergency session is adjourned. The Transition Committee will convene tomorrow to begin its work. As the representatives began to disperse, many approached the Terran delegation, expressing interest in both the Aegis technology and the Federation proposal. Morgan engaged with each, building the coalition of support that would be crucial in the coming negotiations. Peterson watched with admiration as she navigated the complex diplomatic waters with grace and determination. The confrontation was far from over, but the momentum had shifted dramatically. What had begun as an attempt to restrict Terran development had transformed into a fundamental reconsideration of galactic governance. And at the center of it all stood President Olivia Morgan, not just defending humanity's place among the stars, but reimagining it. 6 months later, Admiral Peterson stood on the observation deck of TSF Relentless, watching as ships from a dozen species maneuvered in formation around Nexus Station. The joint exercises, the first conducted under the newly ratified Galactic Federation Charter, represented a visual manifestation of the dramatic changes in interstellar relations. Ambassador Chen joined him, datapad in hand. The final ratification votes are in. Admiral, 23 species in favor, 3 abstentions, and only the Volians in opposition. The Federation is officially established. Peterson nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. And the Aegis deployment? Proceeding on schedule. 17 council worlds have requested the system, with joint development teams working on adaptations for different planetary environments. The technology sharing protocols are functioning exactly as President Morgan envisioned. The Volians. Chen's expression turned wry. Still sulking, but increasingly isolated. Their traditional allies have all signed the charter, leaving them little choice but to eventually join or face economic and diplomatic consequences. Peterson turned from the viewport to face his colleague. When we first arrived at Nexus 6 months ago, did you imagine we'd be standing here now, watching the birth of a galactic federation? Not in the slightest, Chen admitted. I expected years of diplomatic wrangling just to avoid the restrictions in Resolution 7291. President Morgan transformed a crisis into an opportunity that has reshaped the galaxy. That she did. Peterson gestured toward a sleek vessel moving into position near the Relentless. The Alterans have even redesigned their diplomatic ships to incorporate elements of our hull geometry. A small thing, perhaps, but symbolic of the new era of exchange and collaboration. The two men stood in companionable silence, watching the ships from many worlds moving in coordinated patterns around the station. Once a symbol of hierarchical authority, Nexus was being transformed into the central hub of a more equitable galactic community. Peterson's comm unit chimed, indicating a priority transmission from Earth. He activated it to reveal President Morgan's holographic image. Admiral Peterson, Ambassador Chen, she greeted them. I trust the exercises are proceeding well? Exceeding expectations. Madam President, Peterson replied. The Joint Command protocols are functioning smoothly, and the integration of communication systems has eliminated most of the coordination issues we anticipated. Excellent. And the Transition Council? Chen consulted his datapad. The new governing structure will be fully operational within 30 days. The election protocols for the Federation Assembly have been finalized, with the first representatives to be selected within 90 days. Morgan nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. You've both done remarkable work. The path from confrontation to cooperation was neither straight nor smooth, but the result exceeds even my most optimistic projections. The credit belongs to you, Madam President, Peterson said. Your vision of a federation based on equality, rather than hierarchy, has resonated across the galaxy. A vision made possible by humanity's approach to innovation, Morgan corrected. Aegis demonstrated that advancement need not threaten stability, that new ideas can enhance security rather than undermine it. The Federation is built on that principle. Progress through collaboration rather than control. She glanced at something off-screen, then returned her attention to them. I've just received word that the Rigelian trade delegation has arrived. We're finalizing the expanded exchange protocols that will form the economic backbone of the Federation. Keep me informed of developments at Nexus. Of course, Madam President. As the transmission ended, Peterson turned back to the viewport. A Centauri vessel was executing a complex maneuver alongside ships from 3 other species, demonstrating the improved coordination that the Federation protocols had enabled. From ultimatum to alliance, he mused. Not the outcome the Council expected when they presented Resolution 7291, nor what the Volians anticipated when they sent warships to New Hope, Chen added. Their provocation revealed the true nature of Terran innovation. Defense without destruction. Security without domination. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that's the lesson in all of this. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to protect without escalation. Not in dominating others, but in elevating all. As the vessels from many worlds continued their synchronized movements against the backdrop of stars, the principle that had transformed galactic politics was displayed in physical form. Diverse elements, moving in harmony, each maintaining its unique identity while contributing to a greater whole. The Galactic Federation had been born not from conquest or coercion, but from a vision of equality and cooperation, a testament to humanity's unique contribution to the cosmic community. And as Admiral John Peterson watched the ships dance among the stars, he felt a profound sense of pride in the role he had played in that transformation. The Terran Empire had faced its greatest challenge and emerged not just undiminished, but elevated, a full and equal partner in a new galactic order. An order built not on fear and restriction, but on respect and collaboration. An order that promised a future brighter than any single species could achieve alone. A future among the stars, together.